Paul Hamilton here, really excited today to talk to you about Edtech Synchronicity. Been working on it for some time, presenting it with my MYO armband, which I'm really excited about because I think it's symbolic of what we're talking about with integrating technology with education. So the MYO armband lets me control my presentation today, and I'm so glad that I've been able to present this concept via my MYO armband. So let's have a little bit of a look. This is Carl Jung. Back in 1920, he talked about synchronicity. He talked about two apparently unrelated events happening together in a purposeful and meaningful manner. And I think this is really what Edtech Synchronicity is all about. Huxley talks about the dangers of using technology in education, and sometimes I think there's been a little bit of a disconnect between how we've used technology in the classroom with our teaching and learning and what we know about already about how kids learn. And so in some regard, our use of technology over the last couple of years, I think has actually taken a step back with where education should be going. And today is all about exploring about how Edtech Synchronicity is about enhancing learning and certainly not going backwards, as Huxley puts it. There's some wonderful resources around, isn't there? The SAMO model is fantastic in regard to looking at when we should be integrating and infusing technology into the curriculum and how we can be doing that. But there was something about the SAMO model that I thought the why aspect of it wasn't quite there, and that's where my reflective framework I think comes to the fore. So let's take a little bit of a look at it. Before I do that, there's been a bit of a disconnect. We only have to look at the App Store at the moment and the plethora of handwriting apps that are available for young students. And some may say this as a substitution, if you like, instead of students actually writing and practicing with pencil and paper, that they're actually using an iPad, for example, to practice their handwriting, but it's a disconnect. If we actually look at what Gardner's talking about, just because it exists doesn't mean we have to use it. And I think handwriting is a really, really good example of a bad substitution. We don't write on an iPad. Practicing with our fingers. If we want them to practice handwriting, let's practice with pencil and paper, correct hand grip, because we don't actually write on an iPad, and there seems to be a sake of, okay, there's an app there, let's use it. Certainly with the limited screen time we want our young children to have, surely we want them using technology in more creative ways and actually practicing handwriting. And we see this throughout the world, young students on tablets practicing. There seems to be a disconnect there. This is not the only example that we have of this disconnect and this substitution. Let's take a teacher that just uses worksheets all the time, hands their students a multitude of worksheets and hopes to get some learning as an end of it. Transferring those worksheets onto Blackboard or Moodle and then calling it transformation and actually innovative thinking is absolutely wrong. It's just putting it in a different place. So this disconnect between pedagogy, if you like, and how the young mind learns and technology seems to be there. And this is what my framework is about, is trying to address those two. Here it is, 4 quadrants, looking at how students learn, looking at how the mind works and effective pedagogy, but also looking at body. And now that wearables, like my MYO armband, Google Glasses, Apple Watch coming in, when's the best time to actually integrate them in education? Do we just use it at any stage, or is there a time and a place? And I'd actually say that there is a time and a place to actually use them. So technology is advancing at a rapid rate. We know that wearables in the next 1 to 2 years are going to explode, and there's no doubt that they're going to come into classrooms around the world. So it's got me thinking about how the body functions and when we should actually be applying technology with wearables and so forth. So let's take a look at this MYO armband, for example. This MYO armband basically picks up EMG signals from my muscles through gestures that I'm making, and actually over Bluetooth controls this presentation. Remarkable and exciting technology, no doubt. Wearables in EDU, well, let's have a little bit of a look and actually bring in some of the actual areas. You know, the health and PE area will explode, but it's got to be an extension of the body and the body movements. It can't be just an add-on. I think the beauty about the MYO armband is it's really talking, or my muscles are talking to it, and controlling my presentation in a natural, smooth motion. There's certainly other implications, I think, of wearables in EDU, but I think it always has to come back to how the body works, and it needs to work, I guess, in synchronicity with how we're actually wearing technology as well. Look, this sort of technology is amazing, you know, accessibility for all learners, the disabled. Imagine if students only had certain muscular function in certain areas, and actually tapping into that so students can access information and actually learn in a school setting with the use of these wearable technologies. Huge implications going forward, but I think, like all other tech, we really need to think about wearables as an extension of the body, not simply an add-on as well. I want to now go into how the young mind works, and I've been working in augmented reality for about 2 years now, and I've gone through this big journey, and the thing that has come about, and the big moment for me, the takeaway moment, is this kind of technology. Are we engaging our students in the tech itself or the actual learning? My first introduction with augmented reality was always about engaging with the technology, and I would ask my students questions at the end of the sessions, and they would look at me with blank expressions because they were engaged with the tech, but they weren't engaged in the purpose of the lesson. And it was really disappointing to get to the end of it, and there was certainly a wow factor and an amazement on behalf of the students, but they weren't engaged in the learning. So what we started to do with augmented reality, we started to look at different types, the different subject areas, and where we could use augmented reality to really enhance learning. And we found that the mathematics classroom was certainly an area that we explored, and we saw some amazing benefits with. This is a student looking at area and perimeter. Personalized video tutorial, linking the worksheet with the personal video that we created and bringing them together in a meaningful way. We actually found some amazing results, but before I get that, amazing results in regard to the trigger image and the overlay. But this is Pamela Rutledge. She's been looking at how AR is actually influencing the mind through persuasion. And I contacted her a little while ago, and she really gave me some insights about the trigger image and the overlay and the connection between the two. And I think a lot of AR apps out there at the moment are not connecting the two in a meaningful and purposeful way. And I think that's the danger of augmented reality in classrooms around the world, not tying into how the mind works and engaging students in the technology much more than the learning. So what did we do? How did we find out this was effective? Basically, we looked at that area and perimeter example that I just showed you, and we looked at 3 linking mechanisms. We looked at hyperlinks, QR codes, and augmented reality. We used the same video tutorial for the activity, but we just linked them in different ways. And then we actually looked at some data of different students and how they retained information going forward. And what we found was quite remarkable. The green on this chart is augmented reality and the results in mathematics questions. And the red and the grey are hyperlinks and traditional QR codes. And you can see there that augmented reality, when matched in the correct manner, actually enhanced learning for our students. That's not to say it would happen with all mathematical concepts. We found that spatial concepts in maths really did use augmented reality incredibly well. So what we want to look at now is actually how the mind works. And when we're talking about persuasion and augmented reality, one of the things that we actually did is we asked our students, and there are some responses here with augmented reality and what they came up with. But it's interesting, we don't do this enough with our students. We don't ask them what worked, what did you like, what was the power of different experiences. And some of the things that the students said were quite remarkable. They talked about having access to the tutorials over and over again until they got it. They talked about how visual it was and how it helped them and how familiar the teachers' voices were in the tutorials, which they really, really liked. So there was a range of different things, but there was one student, his name escapes me at the moment, oh, it was Nick. Oh, sorry, Liam. And he came up to me a year and a half later, and he talked about how he still remembered that tutorial that we actually gave him. He could visually tell me even the color of the pen that we actually used in the video tutorial to work out area and length times width. Now this was remarkable. This was a year and a half later, and it was really good data for us to say that there was that persuasion of the mind that actually worked, which was remarkable. I want to look at now a different way in how students learn, because over the last couple of years I've been exploring, with the help of seeing some amazing speakers, conceptual learning and how we can use technology to bring about great concepts being learned. Quick story, back in year 5 we were learning, I think that we were supposed to be learning big concepts about survival and predator-prey relationships and the circle of life and all of those things we were learning about. But I distinctly remembering our teacher at the front of the room writing up as much as she possibly could on the blackboard, and we just had to go as quickly as we could and write down those facts as quickly as we could before she would rub off and start again. And if we didn't keep up, we wouldn't be able to get down what was at the end of the blackboard, and we would miss out on that content. We wouldn't be able to access that content again. It was an amazing pedagogy or pedagogical thinking by this teacher. I don't remember much about that lesson at all. And it got me thinking about how can we get that sort of information, those big concepts, through to our kids. So I was lucky enough to see Mark Treadwell a little while ago, and he is a real leader in this conceptual learning and looking at concept formation of ideas. And so it got me thinking about how we could use technology more effectively in this manner. So I wanted to teach these big concepts that I talked to you about before. But before I do, Mark Treadwell talks about conceptual beings and us being conceptual beings. And if we look at the old caveman days, that we would learn about hunting, for example, in a conceptual way. We wouldn't learn it through rote learning. We wouldn't say take 2 steps here, 2 steps to the right, throw the spear, and so on. We're actually would learn concepts. So if the animal ran in a different direction, we would know to go around the back and maybe flush the animal out this way. We would learn concepts, and we would learn them conceptually, not through rote learning. So it got me thinking about how I could use this with my students. We were looking at sustainability and that big concept of our world and how it works and why do some species live on and some become endangered and overpopulation, all those big concepts we wanted to tackle. And normally I would do like my teacher did. We'd take a species, we'd learn about that species, we'd look at the facts and the life cycle and the reproduction rate, and we would learn it all about that. But at the end of it, my students weren't making connections with other species and the world and looking at those big discussion points. So what I wanted to do was actually look at all of those things, but look at it and teach it in a conceptual way. So what we actually did is I actually used a gaming app. Now, this app, Topia, that I actually used for this lesson, you won't find in any education category on the App Store. It's because the teacher is the one that's facilitating the learning. And I mentioned before the crucial and significant role a teacher plays. And so what we did is we used this app, we built worlds, we actually put in fictitious species through, we looked at how they interacted with each other, we put in more predators, we looked at a whole range of different things. And what I had my students doing, well, what I observed was really quite remarkable. I got them to make observations and to jot down notes in real time about the different species. I wanted them to manipulate the environments, the physical environment. I wanted them to do little control experiments with the different species and just see what happens. And what I witnessed was students writing down notes like I'd never seen them before. It was really quite amazing. At the end of it though, it was those rich discussions we had about overpopulation, starvation, sustainability, climate change. We had all these things. I found that the students were making connections with our Earth by actually creating this fictitious world. And I think there's something in conceptual learning that we need to explore more as teachers. And I think technology, with the use of some of these applications that are out there, these simulations world-building apps that we can actually foster greater learning of these big concepts in our classrooms. Now, I want to get to the pedagogy now. I want to really focus on pedagogy because I think it's crucial. I think it's one of the most important parts of my framework that really we need to link, because I believe that we know so much about how kids learn and how the mind works. I think we've got incredibly effective pedagogy already known, and by linking it with technology, we can actually bring about enhanced learning. Formative feedback, we know, is an effective pedagogical practice. If we can get messages to our students that guide them in the right direction and give them feedback about what they're producing, we know that we're going to have a better chance of enhanced learning. Now, this comes from Hattie's research. So all these points that I make here, we know are proven and tested effective pedagogy. So things like differentiation. How do we create individual pathways for our students? Because they're all at different ability levels, they all learn at different rates. How do we do that? And we know that the online environment can give us those pathways. We can infuse technology very, very effectively to bring about differentiation. Doing, creating, building. I think this is one of the really big challenges of early childhood education, where we have maybe a play-based attitude to learning, which is fantastic, but we want our students building, creating, gaining skills and building learning more than just tapping and watching and viewing. And I think that consumption versus the creation of ideas and the creation of things, building knowledge, is something that we really need to get our head around. Technology can aid us, but it also can do the opposite and bring our pedagogical thinking backwards a little bit, like Huxley was talking about at the start. And opportunities. How do we allow our students, like the augmented reality, to have multiple opportunities to learn concepts? How do we do that? And technology, we have amazing strategies that we can implement that bring about these opportunities. Let's take feedback, for example, and look at how technology can really enhance formative feedback. Even we can look at video analysis. The health and PE classroom, the music, the dance, the drama, videoing students. We've never had better accessibility to multimedia than we do today. Cloud-based sharing. How do we give feedback via Google Docs? How do we do it effectively? How do we bring in sound and audio and movies in regard to giving feedback to our students? How do we bring about peer feedback? How do we get students in our classrooms collaborating together and working together instead of this teacher being the central unit in the classroom? And technology can really help us in that regard. So let's take a look at a little bit of a journey and pedagogical thinking along the way. Look, the interactive whiteboard was amazing, and teachers do amazing things with interactive whiteboards. But pedagogically, having a student or one teacher at the front of the room and these students on the floor, on their bottoms, not doing the building, not doing the doing, not doing the creating, for long periods of time is something that we want to get away from. So even though the interactive whiteboard was quite revolutionary in the technology, and I was very, very much guilty of this, I had my students sitting for long periods of time and not doing the pedagogical things we know our students should be doing, which is active learning, making, creating, actually doing the sums, I guess, in mathematics. And sometimes technology, like Huxley said, can actually bring our pedagogical thinking backwards. And I think it can dumb down education to a certain extent. And we need to be really, really careful of that. Sometimes effective pedagogy doesn't even involve technology at all. For example, this is my whiteboard classroom. So I've got just whiteboard paint throughout the whole rooms. My kid's doing some coding at the moment, just writing up ideas, scrubbing out each other's, altering the code, coming in. No tech there at all, but just really good pedagogy. And I think that one-to-one classroom setting can be a little bit dangerous when we don't have kids collaborating in that sort of fashion. This is my learning space in my classroom. You can see here really, really flexible, open learning. We've got some augmented reality happening on the sides. We've got opportunities for kids to collaborate in different settings, which is fantastic. and no cords, very much. We've got Apple TVs in a cordless situation where students can actually throw pieces of work up onto the board that we can critique and give formative feedback to. So I think learning spaces really come into this Edtech synchronicity that we really want our students adopting. So here it is again, 4 quadrants, I guess, that I've created to really get you to think about how you're going to integrate technology and really reflect on your current ways, because I think there's a lot of technology integration happening in classrooms around the world that really don't fit into these 4, and it really gives us a blueprint, I think, to go forward, especially with innovation and implementing new things like this wonderful MYO armband that I'm still getting used to. Where does it actually fit? And if it ties in with how the body functions, and if it aids to what I'm trying to do, and it talks to my body and my body talks to it, then we've got a better chance of using wearables in our classroom a little bit more. So this is just a quick presentation. I hope you found something worthy of it. I'm going to take my MYO armband on the road with some presentations in the United States and in Australia next year. Get in contact with me. I'd love to know about what your, I guess, feedback for me is on this framework. And I hope that we can work together to bring about some change with integrating technology into the classroom. Paul Hamilton here signing off.